Good morning, Facebook. Hello, everybody. It is early. It is early on Friday. Let's see here. Make sure I'm live here. Of course, I'm on my computer. I'm going to talk about beef this morning, the tender steak. Just have to say, if you are a vegetarian, probably not a topic that you want to watch. We love our vegetarian friends. In fact, Jamie and I primarily eat vegetarian. We eat mostly vegetarian. We've been doing that for years. So that's why we have a lot of vegetarian options on our menu, is because we eat our food all the time. So we want to be able to eat things that have less animal proteins, less animal products in them. So that's why we have such a great selection of vegan, vegetarian, and we're very, very conscious. But there are a lot of people that do like steaks and beef, so I'm going to address those people right now. So if you are vegetarian, this is not for you, not a topic for you. Please no hate mail. We love you. That's why we have all those options for you. So many, many years ago when we went to open the restaurant, Jamie and I wanted to open up an all vegetarian restaurant. In fact, all vegan restaurant was what we wanted to do. And I was sitting in the office in New York City with Gary Null. If anybody knows who Gary Null is, I have a few of his books back here. The one book that changed my health was Get Healthy Now and the Way I Viewed Food. So this book was written, I think, by 1999. 1998, really amazing book, and that really changed the way I cooked. In fact, his Power Aging book, which I wrote all the recipes for, all vegan in there. So I was sitting in his office, and he's very, very, very plant based, right? And he said, "Marcus, I know upstate New York." In fact, he was the one who started the High Falls Food Co-op. He goes, "I know upstate New York, I had a farm up there and this and that." He goes, "But if you want to succeed in a restaurant and have longevity in the restaurant, you're going to have to appeal to more people." And he goes, I'm with you on this, but you're going to have to appeal to more people, and you're going to have to offer meat and educate people about this and that, and then have a good longevity run, as opposed to not making it. So I'm not opposed to eating meat. Jamie and I do have a steak here and there. We do have a burger here and there, but only the stuff that we know and we trust. It's my alarm clock. I'm supposed to be getting up now, but I've been up for the last hour getting some work done because I've got to get to New Jersey and get to a funeral. So we take a lot of pride and care in everything we source, including our meat products and everything. So just want to address what makes a tender steak. So if you're tuning in this morning, just drop a comment, hashtag live, if you're on the live, if you're up early this morning. It is about 6 a.m., 6:01 right now. So, this is the best time for me to get work done in my office because nobody delivers this early, nobody calls this early, so I can sit in here undistracted, without any distractions, and get work done. So, all right, so what makes a tender steak? So we've been led for years to believe that marbling is the key factor that makes a steak tender. Marbling is all the streaks of fat in the steak. So the USDA created, or the Beef Council, whoever created a grading system where you have select, choice, prime. Those are and those are some, and there's other levels too, but those are the three top ones: select, choice, and prime. So when you go to a steakhouse, you'll see a prime New York strip steak, a prime filet mignon. They really don't advertise choice too much. Choice is more or less average. So to become prime, you have to have a certain level percentage of fat, streaks of fat in there. The logic behind this is the more fat that's in the beef, the tender it's going to be, because the fat's going to break up the muscle tissue, and you're going to have juicier, tenderer beef. Now, that's been the theory for for decades. Is that 100% true? Yes, it is true, but there are other factors that people have just don't take into account at all. A lot of people say, "Oh, grass-fed beef is tough because it doesn't have enough marbling, this and that." Back when I was a young chef in my early 20s, I had the fortune of meeting several key players in the beef industry in Colorado. And one of them was Dale Lassiter, who, if you've read Fast Food Nation, which was written back, I think, in 1998. If you read Fast Food Nation, the author goes through talking about everything that's wrong with our food supply and our beef, and he talks about, all the work conditions, the cattle conditions, and how horrifying it is. Then the very last chapter, he says, now there's hope in the world, and he talks about Dale Lassiter and his 90,000 acre farm in Simla, Colorado. And Dale and I were able to become very close out there. Dale was actually a member of the country club that I worked at, and then the restaurant that I had helped open. He was a very frequent guest of ours. In fact, we did farm dinners with Dale, and bought a lot of his beef. And then I had the pleasure of meeting and becoming very friendly with Frank Grindinger, who was also in the book Fast Food Nation, talking about his very small beef production facility. Most cattle, most beef, they go through these very large feedlots, and then they go through this very large processing plant, which is typically in with the feedlot, right? So the feedlot's outside, the processing plant's on the grounds, and they keep the cattle, they buy the cattle, fatten them up, and then pump them through. IBP, Iowa Beef Packers, in the 70s were the ones who changed this industry forever. They were the first ones to have a cow go in on one end and come out on the other end in a box, all cut up. Prior to that, you would have the cow go in, and then what was called hanging carcass, where you'd hang the beef and then ship hanging carcass on a truck to the destination, and then it would go to a breaking house. A breaking house were highly skilled, qualified butchers that then broke this down into other pieces, and then it went into the local grocery stores, the local markets. And sometimes your local market, your local meat market, would buy what's called hanging carcass. So this was a very viable industry, very highly trained butchers. And then when IBP said, we don't need a butcher anymore, we've solved the butcher problem. So we can pump 400 animals an hour through that door, and at the other end just keep pumping out boxes. You want boxes of prime ribs, you want boxes of strip steaks, you want boxes of beef cheeks, whatever you want, oxtails, it's all in the box for you. It's ready. You need no butcher anymore. And the art of the butcher was lost when IBP did this. And it took a couple decades, but IBP totally changed the way beef we consume beef, and how it becomes just available to us in these great meat markets. There are still great meat markets out there, but most cities across the U.S. There are no breaking out. Even New York City only had one breaking house 20 years ago. So really, it is a very lost art. So in the realm of mass producing beef, they were finding that the beef was getting very tough, as opposed to beef that was coming from small producers, small processing plants. So they came up with this grading system, fatten the cattle up, get them as fat as possible, get a lot of marbling, a lot of fat in there, and we'll call this is supposed to going to make tender beef. What was a real issue was that when you pack animals that close together, and you put them there and put them on things that are not part of the diet, but the levels of stress, of adrenaline, the levels of stress that are going through that animal alter the pH of the animal. And by altering the pH of the animal, you get tough, chewy meat, because it alters the muscle meat. The adrenaline that goes through the stress totally alters that. And by putting 400 animals an hour through a processing line is not the ideal way to do that. Now, all the beef producers do that, and whether it's Montfort, IBP, that's what they have to do to make money. The beef industry is so competitive that they barely make $15, $20, $30 per animal that goes through, so that's why they have to do 400 an hour. When I was very close with Frank Grindinger, he was only doing 30, 40, 50 animals a day that were coming straight from the farm, coming to his facility, and then getting processed and going through. So that was ideally how America was before IBP and before all this took over. But of course, IBP changed that, and they're all guilty of it. Montfort, they're all that's just their business model, is mass volume. So Frank Grindinger at GNC Packing in Colorado called me in one day. Actually, the very first day I met him, the very, very, very first day I met him, he comes into the restaurant I'm in Colorado, Walter's Bistro, And he introduced himself, and I knew no known who he was. I'd never done really business with him. And he goes, "I want you to grill this steak and eat it and tell me what you think." And he goes, "I want you to tell me what cut of meat beef you think this is." And it was a cut of beef that I had never seen before. Of course, I'm in my early 20s, 24, 25 years old, mid 20s. So, do I have 20 years of experience? No, I don't. But I've been in the restaurant industry, you know, and I've worked some nice places. And I'm looking at this piece of meat, and I'm scratching my head, and I'm like, okay, I have no idea what this is. I go, "Frank, I'm going to take a wild guess and say this is the neck." I said, "But the neck doesn't eat this tender. This is a very tender piece of meat." So I'm really confused. Like, this is not your normal prime rib, ribeye, strip steak, filet. It's not even a sirloin. I'm going through. I'm like, this is just not. I'm like, is this like neck meat? Like, he goes, "You're right. It's a neck roll." And I go, "Why is it so tender?" He goes, "Can I show you why it's so tender?" And I said, "I would love to know why this is so tender. I mean, this is amazing. Like, how much does this cost per pound?" And he told me, I'm like, "I can make money on this. If I can serve this cut of beef, this is going to revolutionize the finances of this restaurant, of any restaurant, right?" And so he goes, "You have time right now?" And I said, he goes, "You have an hour right now?" I go, "I have an hour right now." So we literally go 3-4 miles down the road to his processing plant. He hands me a hard hat, white lab coat, and he goes, "Come back with me. I'll show you what makes our beef tender." And again, if you're vegetarian, this is not for you, and I apologize. Totally apologize. We love our vegetarian friends. Jamie and I are primarily vegetarian. Not this video content's not for you. We apologize. We love you. We'll still have lots of options for you. So, we go into a processing room, and he shows me this separate building that he just got built, and we walk inside, and we have to dip our feet in the water to you know, so there's no contamination. We got all the hard hats on and everything on, and I'm looking at this. I'm like, this isn't a processing plant. This is looks like a dairy or a distillery. And there's these big vats, so stainless steel vats. It's highly computerized. And he goes, "What we're doing in this room, nobody else does in America right now. It's being done in Australia. It's being done in a couple other places across the world." He goes, we have temporary USDA approval to do this process." He goes, "What we're essentially doing is altering the pH of the carcass of the animal, of the meat, of the muscle tissue. We're altering the pH." And he goes, "The animal comes through, it's put down, it's hung up, it's weighed, so the computer now processes the weight. We know it's 1,100 pounds, 900 pounds, whatever, sends it back to this computer right here on the wall, registers, and all these bags here, these pallets of bags, are mineral solution. It's a mineral solution to help with rigor mortis. When anything goes through rigor mortis, right? That we want to hang on to anything on a cellular level. We want to hang on to everything, and this can cause rigor mortis right away. Anything, fish, everything. When you catch a trout or something, you know, it becomes stiff as a board because it's going through rigor mortis. It's holding on to everything. So he goes, this is going to trick the meat into and giving it nutrients and reversing rigor mortis and adjusting the pH of the beef to make a tender steak every time. He goes, "That's why I brought you one of the toughest cuts of meat that you could not grill on a grill, slice medium rare, and eat." He goes, "I brought you one of the cuts that you just can't do that." I said, "I see that." So now this computer starts generating this and pumping through, and what they do is they go into the animal, and once they put the animal down, they go through the carotid artery and literally pump a whole solution through the animal. A chilled solution at like 36 degrees. I forgot what the exact temperature was. The process is called rinse and chill, and it's not used by many people at all because IBP, Montfort, all those big people, when they do 400 animals an hour, you can't take 4 or 5 extra minutes per animal to do that. Your business model will get thrown off, your profits will get thrown off, and besides, why do anything like that? Because it's not worth it for you at that point. You would totally alter. But smaller processing plants that do 100 animals, 200 animals, 300 animals a day can take the time to do this. So a solution goes through the animal, gets run right through the cardiovascular system of the animal, and at 36 degrees, which chills the beef internally. A lot of times, beef has to go get hung up, and then it takes hours and hours and hours for the actual meat to cool because it's being fan forced. This actually cools it, goes in, cools the whole animal, the whole process, and alters the pH. Lets the on a cellular level, nothing's being held onto anymore. It's being dumped freely for rigor mortis, so it reverses rigor mortis, and it was an amazing process. And I'm like, Frank, this is like revolutionary. And he goes, and then I met Warner, the owner of the actual process, which is from Minnesota, and this process never really got kicked off the ground, just because it takes. The big companies were fighting this from the very beginning. The big companies did not want this technology. They knew they could never do this technology. So it only went to a couple of small, very small processing plants that were willing to spend $1 million to get the equipment, to build it, to buy the product, and literally cost $1 million to do this build out in a processing plant. So more normal processing plants would think that this was just not worth it. In Australia, that's where it really got hold in Australia, this process. And some of the larger producers were doing that out there in Australia, larger for them. And that's really where like it really ended. It never really went anywhere in America, except for these couple of plants. There's one plant in Texas that was doing it. There was a plant in Alabama that was doing it. I would communicate with Warner, the owner of MSPC, I believe was the name of the company that was doing this. And then that was explained to me how pH at that point affects the quality of your steak. pH is a direct correlation. Oh, wow, it's light out. It's 6:15 and it's light out. I'm going to go for my run now. I was ready to go with my headlamp and everything. This is great. When I got in my office, it was dark. So pH, that is the real factor for tender beef, is the pH, the pH of the meat. So now, fast forward to 15 years later, 10 years later, fast forward, I'm in New York City at a food show, and there's a company there that has grass-fed beef. They're importing it from New Zealand, and I walk up, I'd like to talk to everybody. I like to see what the processes are. And he goes, we have the best tender beef, this and that. He goes, it's pH tested. I go, wow, you're one of the first people I've heard in the industry. It's been years since you've talked about the actual pH of the beef. And I said to him, I go, is this rinse and chill? And he goes, how do you know about rinse and chill? I go, I was involved in the process in the very, very beginning days in the U.S. And he goes, no, Marcus, this is not rinse and chill. He told me this is not rinse and chill. This is a way of raising animals in a very low stress environment, going through a small plant, everything that that I'd been taught. And he goes, we pH test every single every single thing that comes through. It's pH tested, and different levels of pH go through different programs. This reserve program is 5.6, 5.7. He goes, that's the ideal pH for tender steak. So, Keith and I got along very well from the very beginning, because I was able to have an intelligent conversation with him, because I knew something about this. Most chefs don't know about this. None of them know about rinse and chill. So, long story short, we use this beef now from New Zealand. This is what our ribeye steaks are. pH tested. As a result of my knowledge of beef, and in the restaurant, I'm actually part of the training program for the farmers that are in the ranchers that are in New Zealand through this program. I'm on the training videos for them, and everything's pH tested, and it is super tender. Serving these ribeyes in the last, I don't know, we've been serving them 10 years. We have had 0 complaints on the toughness of our ribeye. Zero complaints. Everybody says, even other restaurant owners say, where do you get your ribeyes from? Where do you buy your, where do you, this is one of the most tender ribeyes, this is the most tender ribeye we've ever had. And I said, well, it's graded on, what grade is this? I said, it's graded on pH. And that throws everybody off. It's graded on a pH scale. It's not graded on prime. It's not graded on choice. It's not graded on any of that. It's graded on pH. That's how our beef is tested. It's pH tested. and it goes into a program, different levels of pH, and we buy the tenderest level of the pH. I have a lot of friends, a lot of chef friends that are like, wow, this is like fantastic. How do I get a hold of this beef? And the thing is, this beef is 100% grass-fed, grass-finished, zero grain. And typically, a lot of people associate grass-fed beef as being tougher, which is why the marbling system came in. So if you first joined this in the very beginning, if you missed in the very beginning, talking about the marbling system of beef. Beef industry has led us down the road that the more fat they have, the more streaks of fat in beef, the tender it's going to be, and that's true to a certain extent. But the real test of tenderness is actually the pH model. But again, the pH model could never be done by the big guys. They can just not. It's something they cannot produce. It's something that's just impossible at a large scale like that to keep an animal very calm, stress-free environment. The animals know what's happening. It's. I mean, to go through a processing plant is not a pretty thing. Even if you are a meat lover, meat eater, hunter, even if you are a hunter, going through a beef processing plant is one of the most horrific things that you can probably see. So you have to have a really strong stomach for something like that. And I haven't been in one in many years, since Colorado. So, but it gives you a whole new respect for what you're serving as a chef. It gives you a whole new respect because you want to be able to source, buy, support the most sustainable, stress-free, the most cruelty-free, whatever it is. That's after going through it and seeing all this kind of stuff. And Dale Lassiter's farm is amazing. I wonder if I have a picture of it. Dale Lassiter's farm is amazing. Last time I was there with Dale, we were there in 2010, I think. We were out visiting with him. And on that farm, let me just see if I have a picture here. I actually might. Let's see. So, actually, no, I don't know how to get to it. I've put them on my Facebook in the past. But we literally go out into 90,000 acres, and you walk out into these fields. Now, he has, for 90,000 acres, he has thousands of cattle. And you walk out into the fields, and the cattle come right up to you. They come, and this like you'll see 200 cattle because they're in groups. They're not all in one lump sum. He has different herds out there on these 90,000 acres, and we go out there, and 200 cattle will literally like run towards you. Like they'll come towards you, and the moms bring their babies, and the bulls are there. The only dangerous part of doing that is when two bulls get together. So you always stay clear of two bulls, because they're not coming after you, but sometimes they get a little agitated at each other, and you're the byproduct of two 1,100-pound bulls going at it. So, but the cows, the heifers come right up to you. They bring their babies. They're actually like dogs, and they're very affectionate, and they run towards you. But this isn't the case on a lot of farms, or it's not a lot of case of the beef you're buying in the grocery store. A lot of those cattle are very scared, because that's just the life they've had. They've been going from auction to auction. So new owners, they get hauled in a truck several hundred miles. They go to a pasture, a mid-feeder, then they get auctioned off again, and then all of a sudden they'll go to Montfort, Colorado, or wherever they're going, these big processing plants, and they'll literally get jammed into a feedlot that is nothing but mud and cow manure, and have troughs of grain and whatever else they're feeding them, and they'll just be in a totally new environment. This is where disease starts happening. You put everybody close together, all these animals close together. They're standing in their own manure. They're eating crap. They're eating things that are not on their diet. They're gaining excessive weight. Gaining weight is actually a comorbidity. We've learned that through COVID. If you have comorbidities, you're more likely to get COVID. Well, gaining weight, overweight, is a comorbidity. So they've taken these cattle and they've fattened them up to the maximum point, and now they're telling us this is how you have to eat tender beef, by overstuffing an animal, creating a very obese animal, unhealthy animal, and then saying, well, this is the best way to eat beef, which I don't think that model is, and I've known this for 20 plus years. That's not the model of ideal beef to eat. So these cattle and these feedlots, you can't even go near them because they've just had that life of fear, and the stress, and you go to these feedlots and they run from you. You go to Dale Lasser, you go to small family farms, Wheatley Farm, where we get our beef from for our burgers, Wheatley. You go to that farm and the animals come to you. They're out on grass. So totally different situation. So obviously a lot less stress, right? Friendlier animals, the whole thing. Everything makes a difference in the processing of beef. So that grading system was invented so they could abuse the system and tell us this is how you have to eat beef and this is the tender cut. So all these steakhouses insist that they serve prime grade steak, dry aged prime grade steak, whatever it is. They associate this with quality. So this just throws a little curveball on that whole paradigm of that if you listen to this whole thing. So thank everybody who are just tuning in. We really, really appreciate it. I know it's early in the morning, so not many people were on, but hopefully people will catch us on the replay. I'm going to go for my run right now, and then I've got to get to Newark, New Jersey to pick up our ribeyes and a few other things. We're going to have a ribeye sale next week. So usually we charge $17.99 a pound for ribeyes, $14.99 a pound for ribeyes next week. So this kind of goes to the theme of my little talk here this morning. So ribeye sale next week, $14.99 a pound. So that's it. All right, I'm going to go for my run now and get going to Jersey and then off to my aunt's funeral, unfortunately. That's where I will be. That's where I was last night at the wake. If you were here at the restaurant, Jamie and I were at a wake last night, my aunt's wake. So that is it, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate the support. And if there's any questions, drop any comments. And again, we love our vegetarian friends, and I don't want to leave the page. So we love our vegetarian friends, and we'll still have lots and lots of options for you. Because again, Jamie and I primarily eat vegetarian, pescatarian, little fish. Jamie and I are the kind of people that if we go to a restaurant, I do not trust the fish at other restaurants. I would never trust the meat at another restaurant, because I just know this whole model of how places buy. If you're concerned about going to a restaurant to eat high quality meat, this is the way I would approach it. I would go to a farmer's market and then ask at the farmer's market, one of the beef suppliers there or whoever, one of the farms, so are there any restaurants in the area? And you can do this all over the country. You can do this any part of the country. You know, is there any restaurants that buy your steak, that buy your beef, that buy your chicken, that buy whatever? And they're going to say, oh, yeah, there's a couple restaurants. Oh, great, I would love to go support them. So whether you're in San Francisco, whether you're in Denver, whether you're in a small town in Tennessee or Florida, that is the number one way to find out who is serving high quality beef. Other than that, they're just buying possibly run-of-the-mill stuff that's obviously the stuff I just spoke about. So if you can connect from the producer, and this is how we buy a lot of our foods. We find the product we like first. We find the product that we love. So these ribeye steaks that we've been serving here for 10 years, we absolutely love them. Absolutely love them. We know the source. We know the owner of the company very well now. But they don't distribute. They don't have distribution. They distribute in New York, in New York City, New Jersey. They distribute. They send a truck out, but they don't send a truck here to New York. So for us to have this beef, I have to drive to Newark, New Jersey every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. That's just the bottom line. I have to do that. We used to do FedEx. We used to have it FedExed in. FedEx costs $2 a pound. So if I'm going to go today and pick up our brisket, because our brisket comes from the same company, if I pick up brisket, if I pick up ribeyes, and a couple other things, and if I load up 500 pounds of beef, I'm going to save $1,000. It's worth it. If I was going to save $100, I'd say FedEx it in, because my time isn't worth $100 to go for 4 hours, 3 hours. But to save $1,000, this is one of the ways that we can keep our prices competitive. This is why we can do the steak for $9.99 certain weeks. This is why we lowered our prices. When COVID happened, I started making this trip Pre-COVID, I wasn't really making this trip. It was much harder for me to do. So once COVID happened, I said, you know what? We need to be able to save money. We need to be able to be creative. And so that was one of the things we did during COVID. So, all right, folks. Thank you, everybody who tuned in. Sean, Melissa, Julia, and anybody else who tuned in. Thank you very much. I'm going for my run, and I got to get to Jersey, and we'll be back tonight. Talk to everybody later.